Hello everybody, and thank you for coming back to yet another episode of The Gloving Paradigm. I am your host Peter, aka LPD8 Dubuque, and this week it's going to be a very interesting week, but first things first, I want to get a couple of announcements out of the way so people are informed. First things first is, yes, Lights On Season 5 is happening. As of May 15th was the start of registration, so by the time this episode is posted, which will be on Monday, it is most likely have been all filled up and ready to go. So just want to give you guys that kind of heads up, just in case you didn't know. And also, one other thing that I would definitely want to address is that by the time this episode is posted, yes, EDC has come and gone. However, I do want to inform a lot of my listeners who are pretty big fans of Futuristic Lights. They've actually posted through Glover's Lounge and various other platforms that if you have your gloves confiscated by security and unable to retrieve them back, that they are willing to help people regardless of what chip type that they have in terms of their products, that they will actually give you a huge discount to help replace those. So if you're one of those people who snuck in their gloves and got them confiscated by security, you now have an option to replace them with relative ease and not being such a huge hit to your wallet. So with those out of the way, I can get into this episode. So this week, what am I actually going to be talking about? Well, it's actually a very interesting topic because this was a topic I didn't really think about doing before, because I didn't necessarily think it was kind of a big thing or even a thing in the gloving community as it is. But it was something that kind of sparked an idea in my head when I was talking to another person about it. So what am I going to be talking about? Well, it's quite simple. It's all just about returning glovers, people returning back into the gloving scene. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to get back into the scene to do like competitions or stuff, just relatively getting back into what the general scene is in terms of concepts and, you know, activities and whatnot, events, what have you. You know, just the generalized way of coming back into gloving. Okay, so what really brought on this topic for me was I was actually talking to my former pupil / younger brother, who has, as he put it, felt like he's been out of the loop for a while, which is totally understandable considering that he's had some higher priorities that he had to address first before he can actually really consider going back into gloving, which to me is kind of funny. I never really thought he would ever fall out of gloving, but you know, people tend to do. It's, you know, the natural thing in my opinion. You know, some things kind of take more precedence over other things, and sometimes you have to put something on the back burner. And something like gloving tends to take that hit from time to time. It's, you know, it's, you can't be blamed for that, you know, especially if you are handling higher priorities. So when I was talking to him about pretty much my podcast and trying to figure out a topic to cover, and when he said that he felt like he was out of the loop, that was what sparked the idea of this topic, was people coming back into gloving after taking a hiatus. So why would one actually take a hiatus? Well, there's multitude of reasons, and I can sit here and spout every single type of situation that somebody can go through, but instead of doing that, I'd rather just have these umbrella terms for you guys to help you understand why somebody would. If you're actually one of those people who have done it, you probably will understand. You know, first thing is always going to be higher priorities. Things tend to take precedence over other stuff, you know. If you're somebody who's in college and is, you know, really on the home stretch of getting their degree, especially if it's a degree that takes more than 4 years, you know, you're going to tend to push things onto the back burner to focus on that just to get through it, you know. And that's totally fine. That's actually a great idea if you feel like gloving is something that's just not very important right now and you need to put it on the back burner to take care of other things. That's fine. That's actually something I would encourage you to do, because what's the point of gloving if you're literally losing your house or losing everything that you possess and getting repoed and all that stuff? You know, it's kind of like the same thing that I've heard from Magic the Gathering players, is that you shouldn't be spending your entire income on cards if you can't pay your bills and all that stuff. You know, it's kind of the same concept that's going on here. For me, when I was getting back into competitive gloving, well, not gloving, excuse me, getting back into competitive Magic, you know, I had to really analyze my income and make sure that what I wanted to do would not also hurt me in the long run in terms of finances. There is a reason why they say that certain card games are referred to as cardboard crack, because that's just how it is. You just are essentially addicted to it, not necessarily in a physical way, but just in a psychological way. You tend to go overboard sometimes. I will even admit that I do that as myself as well. I tend to, especially when it comes to like deck building, instead of just lightly throwing cards together and calling it a deck, I will actually sit there and spend hours writing down suggestions of cards that I can use and blah 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 blah, so on and so forth. Everybody who's listened to this channel, this podcast for a good while now, should understand how it is when it comes to me and Magic the Gathering. So, higher priorities tends to happen, and it's a normal way of life. So it's kind of the whole roll with the punches, if you will. Another example that I've seen people do is they just simply lose interest. Their creative spark kind of just dwindles out, type deal, and just lose interest in the craft altogether. And you know what? That's not anything that you can be condemned over. It's just you lose interest, and that tends to happen. I will certainly say, even when it came to Magic itself, I tend to lose interest from time to time, and it's just, it could be for a multitude of reasons. Maybe I'm oversaturating myself with it, or I'm just not feeling it anymore, or anything like that. Things like that do happen. So losing interest, while it is tragic for a lot of people because we like having more people in this art form, it just tends to happen. There's certain phases that people go through that you lived with and stuff like that. So that tends to do happen. People lose interest and they move on to other things, and maybe gloving is just a stepping stone to the next better thing, whatever that may be. I'm not saying that there is everything is better than gloving, or gloving is better than everything. I'm just saying that to some people's views, there's other things that are more interesting to them. So, a great, as much as I hate saying this one, this does exist and it does happen. And the best word I can use for it is prohibition. Something that prohibits you from actually doing, partaking in gloving in its entirety. If you're somebody who's still living with their parents who doesn't condone that kind of activity, that's something that will be a prohibition to you. It prohibits you from doing so. If you're not saying that this happens to everybody, but to some people, if they have a newborn child, that tends to take more time out of their hand and prohibits them from actually practicing and actually performing things like that. Now I can understand some people say, well, you can use gloving to entertain your child. That's all well and done, but to some people, it's just, it kind of takes the wind out of their sails. If you are having a very high demanding job where you're just not being able to put any time in, and it feels like your job is literally consuming your entire life and every facet of it, that's one of the things that do happen. I will certainly say I felt like I've been consumed by multiple jobs that I've worked with, where it was literally I go to work, I come home, I go to sleep, I wake up and go right back to work. Like, that was pretty much the lifestyle for me for a while. Things like that do happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. It does suck, but sometimes during these hiatus, you kind of have this realignment of what your outlook on life and things like that, whatever the case may be. When you actually try to come back to gloving, it brings a whole new perspective for yourself and a new understanding of it that will hopefully immerse you more into the art and actually grow a much stronger admiration for it. So there are multiple reasons why people would leave, take their hiatus, whatever the case may be. I will not say that anyone who takes a hiatus from gloving is a bad thing. Kind of like with my Glover's Block episode, taking a break is actually a good thing. It helps you kind of reset everything and look at things with a fresh perspective, So you can take it any way you want. People take hiatuses, and people sometimes come back, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just completely forget about it altogether. It's to each his own, in my opinion. So how does one actually return back to gloving? Well, some people will just say go buy a pair of gloves and just get right back into it, which, to some people that works. To some people it can feel very, very overwhelming. Luckily, you have content creators like myself who provide a podcast like this for free, so you guys can actually get the information you need. And there are plenty of other places that you can also get the information you need as well. A great resource for anyone who's trying to get back in is YouGotMoves.com. It is pretty much an e-learning academy for gloving, done by well-known glovers who have been in the field for a very long time, who have a wealth of knowledge to help you not only learn to get back into it, but to help ease yourself back into it. So, you have multiple ways, but I did ask the community to pretty much, give me their ideas of how to help somebody get back in, and I had quite a good few responses that I was actually very happy that people were actually responding to, because it was one of the most informative things ever. And the first response that I want to cover is from one of the very most well-known glovers in the entire community. While there is still some controversy behind his reputation, to me that does not matter. His accreditation is there and is well earned, in my opinion. And if you don't know who I'm talking about the two-time IGC champion who did it back-to-back. Ice Cream Teddy had responded. So first things first, thank you, Ice Cream Teddy, for actually responding to my post. It was very informative, and I would love it for more if you actually respond more often, but I can understand when you have other priorities. So what he said is pretty simple in my opinion, and it goes as follows. It depends on how long they have been out of it, but usually I would say just stick to what you love about gloving. Example, I really just like giving shows to randoms. I like walking up at a club or at an event and asking someone if they want a light show, blowing their mind, and then dipping out. So I try to make sure that I do that whenever I get the chance. I also recommend dipping back into gloving lightly, not diving right back into it. Be okay with not being at the center of the community. Be okay with not keeping up with everything and just doing what you want to do with the art. If the fire to progress starts to burn, then feed it and go deeper. But for now, just chill in the kiddie pool and enjoy the cool water on your toes. Lastly, do not, and I repeat, do not sit there and talk about how things used to be. All it's going to do is depress you and make you want to leave again. When in fact the truth is that you don't miss the old times because how things were. You miss it because it was a better time in gloving for you. I've learned this the hard way and still forget it sometimes. I honestly think that's solid advice. It is probably one of the best advices I've ever heard in a while. And thank you again so much, Ice Cream Teddy, for actually responding and giving me that advice. I hope to my listeners who are been out and wanting to get back in, I'm hoping that this will be enough inspiration for you to actually come back in, as there should be a multitude of reasons for you to come back in my opinion. And then I also had another person who stated saying he started in 2008, he stopped in 2014. He came back into it about last year and picked up impacting. As he likes to put it, everyone is better than me and I'm okay with that. He's just going to have to accept the same thing. Now, I will certainly say my younger brother is just like me when it comes to gloving, is that it's an expressive outlet for him to evoke his emotions and be able to kind of just put everything out on the table. To him it is not a competitive outlet. To him, just like me, magic is our competitive outlet, and that's where we like to keep it because that's just how we like our competition. Now, I'm not saying that people who compete in gloving competitions are wrong. I encourage people to compete in gloving competitions. It is a new way to analyze the art form in a different capacity, and learning in different perspectives is always something I will encourage all my listeners to do. So, you have things like that. I did have another person ask, how long has he been out? Has it been a couple months or weeks or even years? And his response to that was pretty extravagant in my opinion. I actually thought it was probably besides Ice Cream Teddy's post, this is probably one of the most detailed things I've ever seen. So when I told him that it's been a couple of years for him since he's actually been very active in the art, this is what his response was. Okay, so if the person decides to come back from a long, hard journey of life, first, have to pick out their color set. You can't just glove with the set that you ain't feeling, am I right? Second, they should look for music that makes their creativity flow. Like for me, when I came back from a 2-week break, I had to experiment on several EDM genres to feel okay with progressing. Cleanliness is hard to keep, so you have to warm up to get back into the flawless technique. Thirdly, so after they have find their go-to music, they have to remember what gloving was to them, whether it's the fundamentals or complex grid work, whichever it is. Indeed, okay to do. And fourthly, after they need to just post the show, if anything, watch the show and see where they think the show is lacking, and post for people to either enjoy or critique the choices theirs. Fifthly, the block will take longer if you're not consistent with whatever style you implement on your light shows, because finger shows are cool, but some moves you will never remember once you put the gloves on. That is unless you practice the moves with said gloves. Sixthly, have fun. People have been posting threads instead of light shows, and that really makes it hard for people to get noticed or at least get help from anyone. And I definitely agree with that. That is probably one of the most solid advices I've ever read, and along with everyone who's responded, I honestly thank you so much for responding and giving me as much information as possible so that I can actually compile it and give it to my listeners. So if you guys actually have any comments or any insight onto any questions I ask on my page, please do not hesitate to actually respond. The more responses I get, the more I can actually help people not only see in certain ways, but see how different outcomes are and different perspectives on the art and how to approach it in different ways. You know, the more options that people will get, the more easier for them to actually figure out what works for them. So those are some of the things I definitely just wanted to implore on you. That's some of the community responses. And once again, thank you guys for actually responding. You guys are amazing. So what would be my advice if you were asking me if you were trying to get back into gloving? Well, first things first is your gloves. If you still have your gloves, use those. Those are something that you were using for a while, and why would you need to upgrade if you already have them? You know, one of the major things I always tell people is don't immediately try to upgrade to the best of the line. If you have the money to do it and you want to do that, sure, go ahead. I can't stop you, and it's not something I would stop you unless there was a very important reason to stop you. So if you actually need to replace your gloves since you gave them away or they got thrown away or whatever their fate was that they left your possession, my advice to you is to look at budget options first before you try to buy the next top of the line. Mostly just because if you're trying to get back into it and you buy the next top of the line stuff and you feel like you just don't want to do it anymore and you just kind of want to give it up altogether, now you just spend a crap load of money on things you don't even want. So always try to start with budget options first before you actually commit to actually investing in the premium products, okay? You know, those are the things that, when it comes to gloves, is pretty much my advice on that. Now, there is this mantra that I learned through my time in the military, especially being somebody who was in the reserves for a good long while, is that there's this mantra called remembrance through osmosis. And what that means is that you will remember things that you felt like you forgot when you put yourself back into the environment that you used that in. So, like for me, if I was outside of the military like I am now, I can't really necessarily tell you all the things in detail of procedures and the equipment I use. But if I was back in my uniform, back in my old unit, talking to my old comrades about stuff, I would just instantly remember all of my details, all the stuff that I learned through my training and stuff. As weird as it is, it kind of just puts itself in a memory bank and hides until I absolutely need it. So with this idea in mind, what I try to tell people is listen to the music that you used to listen to when you gloved, just because you kind of are shaking up old memories and kind of bringing yourself back to that state of when you were really active in it. You know, watching videos during the time that you were very active is also very helpful because you're refamiliarizing yourself with something that you were doing for a long while. I know a lot of people will say just watch the newest stuff that has come out, but some people might feel overwhelmed because they see a whole bunch of new different archetypes in terms of concepts that can overwhelm them. So I always tell people, say, if you kind of took your hiatus in 2016, I would start by watching a couple videos in 2016, especially from well-known glovers that you followed when you were active, is really the easiest way, because to me, the ones that you watched and admired really easily are going to be able to give you kind of the same idea of what you were when you were active. It was what inspired you in the first place, so seeing those glovers actually doing stuff more recently will give you kind of that easement back into it. You know what I mean? For example, when I kind of took a small hiatus in 2016 because I had a lot of personal stuff I had to deal with. When I got back, the first thing I was doing was watching videos of well-known glovers that I watched for a good while. TMT Musk Fry, for example, Puppet, Mez, all that stuff. When I kind of got out of it and when I was getting back into it, I immediately started remembering everything that I learned. Now, I can certainly tell you during that 2016 hiatus, I was still practicing and enjoying the art, but I wasn't actively like trying to learn new concepts or anything like that. Like, yeah, sure, I probably recorded a video here and there, but that was pretty much it. So putting yourself in those situations where you can easily remember what you've lost, essentially, is going to be a lot easier for you to get back in, especially if you're listening to the music that you used to listen to. When it comes to practice, though, it is relatively simple in my opinion. First things first is to start slow and to just remember where you were. Kind of just dip your toes back into it and kind of put yourself back into the same spot that you were when you left. Because when you start back to where you left, you pretty much have your foundation built, and now you're just going to progress even further. And another great idea that I always tell people is use simple exercises to kind of rebuild your palette from where you left it. When you take a break and you kind of go back into it, like look at weight training, for example. You take like a 1 month hiatus without doing any training. You're not going to go back into the gym and try to lift like 300 pounds immediately or do any heavy lifting of that nature. You got to start from the bottom and work your way back. So using simple hand exercise, finger exercises are going to help you rebuild your foundation again. And not only that, it's going, in my opinion at least, it's going to trigger that whole muscle memory, second nature thing where your brain's just like, oh, I actually remember how to do this, and it just makes it a lot easier for you to pick it back up. So with those in mind, the other thing I always like to talk to people about is attendance, whether it's, competition attendance, event attendance, EDC, festival attendance, whatever the case may be. I always encourage people to do that. Now, if you can do that, if it's not going to hurt your wallet, then by all means go ahead. If not, do try to find budget options in terms of events and stuff where you're not costing yourself an arm and a leg to actually go attend. The reason why I tell people this is, you're exposing yourself to social opportunities to meet other glovers, actually see what's, the going trends of the times, and you're kind of just putting yourself back into the element that you were when you were active. Like, that was one of the things for me, was trying to find a place to actually go and do that. Has become increasingly difficult, but it isn't the end of the world. Persistence and perseverance is the key here. So having yourself have these social opportunities to meet new glovers is always a great thing. And of course, what is the most paramount thing when it comes to any form of attendance is to have fun. And, especially when it comes to competitions, you don't let the spirit of competition consume you and, make you a sore loser or sore winner. Yes, sore winners is a real thing. It does happen. From my own experience, I've seen it time and time again. So, having that fundamental principle of always just having fun is going to really help you really get back into it. Not only that, you're going to remember what made it so fun for you and hopefully get you more motivated to come back. And my final piece that helps people get right back into it is actually reconnecting with old friends, especially if you have friends who were glovers as well. Like, for a great example, my younger brother hitting me up and talking to me about gloving and kind of getting back into it just by talking to me, since I was his former mentor. That's one of the big things for me, is actually just reconnecting with old friends, especially if they're friends that are also glovers as well, because then you get to see how they progressed, and not only that, they're going to help you learn the new concepts that you want to learn. Now, I can certainly hear some people saying in the background about, subscribing to one style or another. To me, mixing styles is going to help you, kind of stand out in your own way, because combining two different, concept archetypes is also going to kind of push your show apart from everybody else and actually make it that much more unique. Now, I can certainly say that everybody's been doing that, but that that's when people are sitting there tinkering and experimenting and really pushing the envelope and trying out new ideas, and not only trying them out but flushing them out in terms of their precision and their cleanliness and things of that nature. So if you have old glover friends that are still actively gloving, those are the first people I would hit up, just because you're getting yourself back into the fold that way with people that you know and will really actually be willing to help you get back into it. I'm one of those people that if you wanting to get back into gloving, you can always talk to me, and I will, ask you questions of where you feel like you need to start and things of that nature. So those are my advice to you to try to follow, and I really hope that you guys take that into consideration. Now, you don't have to follow it to a T. You can take pretty much the basic principles of what my advice is and tailor it to your own. So it's pretty much just how you're gonna have to tackle it. And I will certainly say, when you're coming back, don't try to just bomb rush the entire place. You really want to ease yourself back in by just kind of taking it one step at a time. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much what you want to do. Is when it comes to coming back, especially my experience, especially like coming back in Magic, I did have to do my homework and research, especially when it comes to competitive Magic. I definitely had to understand what was going on in the metagame and understand what decks were up on the top and what budget options are there that can still hold their own. That's kind of like how it is when it came to me coming back into gloving. It was just simply kind of starting back to where I was very familiar with and just working my way forward there through videos, through tutorials, through conversations, whatever the case may be. So that's pretty much all for my episode this week. I certainly want to say thank you for everyone who has responded to my posts via Facebook or Reddit or on my Discord. I'm very, very proud that you guys have actually responded, and it was most informative and most helpful. Thank you so much. I hope you guys continue your support by responding. I also want to thank to all my listeners and all the people who newly liked the page. Thank you so much for helping me grow my channel very quickly. And by quickly, I mean at a snail's pace, but you know what, to each their own. To me, just showing growth, even at a slow rate, is still growth in my opinion. So definitely want to thank everybody for doing that. If you actually have some questions for me regarding any of the topics that I've covered on this show so far, you have various outlets that you can actually contact me through, which one of them is on Facebook, which is aptly named The Gloving Paradigm. You also have my email, which you can do privately, which is muttonchopguy@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on my Discord server, which the link will be in the episode description, so don't hesitate to go ahead up there. I have plenty of places that you can hit me up, and I have plenty of time to talk. Usually Tuesday through Friday on my off days, so you can always talk to me then. Don't ever hesitate to do so. Yep, that's pretty much all for my episode. Once again, I definitely want to let you guys know that Lights On is starting. Definitely want to keep your eyes on those videos, since you can, get some good ideas from. And if you did attend EDC and got your gloves confiscated, Futuristic Lights is offering a good discount to help people replace their confiscated products, not stolen products. Excuse me. So that's pretty much all for my episode. Thank you guys all once again. I'm your host, Peter, aka LPD Dubuque, and I'll see you guys all next week.